With us now is J.M. Berger, the co-author of a book about IS and a fellow at George Washington University's programme on extremism. Mr. Berger, thank you very much for joining us. What's your view on how genuine these documents are?
Well, I think the jury is still out. Some analysts have noted that there are inconsistencies among the different documents. There are a few things that have raised some questions in people's minds. However, these are very similar to other IS documents we've seen before, particularly documents produced by Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the direct predecessor of IS. There were a large body of documents that was released by the U.S. government that are very similar personnel records and have formed the basis for a lot of really interesting studies.
Is it surprising that organisations that want to try to go undetected in a way should write things down in this fashion, isn't it?
Well, Al-Qaeda was very bureaucratic, so even from the beginning, I have documents similar to these that go back to the 1980s. They kept very scrupulous records of their personnel. They asked very similar questions back in the 80s, and really throughout the history of the movement, we've seen that jihadists are very obsessive record keepers.
How does it weaken the organisation at all?
Well, this data is obviously something that can be used in law enforcement. It can be used to detect people who are traveling back. It can be used to expose recruitment networks in particular. I think that that's where the real utility of this will be, because if you know who these people are and you know a little bit about how they got to Syria, then you can trace back how they were recruited into the organization.
And knock on their door from time to time if they come home. What about public perception of Islamic State? How is that altered at all by a leak of this size?
Well, I think that there's been a certain amount of surprise at the record keeping and sort of the bureaucracy of the state, which as I said, it's something that most people wouldn't have taken note of these previous releases, but for those of us who follow the movements, it's very much par for the course. I don't think that this distinguishes IS from Al-Qaeda, for instance. I mean, I think we saw very similar and very scrupulous record keeping in both organizations, so it doesn't necessarily legitimize their claim to be a state. What
sort of state is Islamic State in terms of its finances? I mean, it certainly doesn't seem to be short of recruits.
Well, the finances, I think, are under some pretty serious pressure at this point. The biggest part of IS financial strength is goods and currency that is confiscated from people in the territories it captures. So, as it loses territory and as we see that they're not able to capture new territories, that's not a renewable resource. You can only loot a town so many times before there's nothing left to take from it. So I think they're probably under some pressure now.
J.M. Berger, we appreciate you talking to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.